Hello, everyone. I think we're just going to wait just a minute or two and let folks continue joining the webinar, and then we'll kick things off momentarily. Okay. In the meantime, maybe you guys can confirm in the chat. Someone let me know you guys can hear me well. Perfect. Good. Okay. I think we're good to go. Let other folks join in as they can. But we can start. Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to our OpenNebula webinar. Today, we're going to be focusing on taking a look at some of the new features of OpenNebula 6.0, which we released last month, and digging into those features' impacts on its integration with VMware. Okay. Here's a quick look at the lineup of speakers you're going to hear from today. I'm Michael Abdou. I'm the Customer Success Manager at OpenNebula. I'm joined today by Tino Vázquez. He's our Head of Engineering, as well as Jim Freeman, who's a Cloud Solution Engineer at OpenNebula as well. Okay. Tino's going to start us off and really take us through OpenNebula 6.0 and really those features that allow you to take OpenNebula and run with your VMware infrastructure. Then after that, Jim's going to follow up with a demonstration and show you how you can run a multi-tenant cloud on top of vCenter. And then I'm just going to finalize things, running through our OpenNebula support and services that we have available for VMware users. And then at the end, we'll have time for a Q&A session. We're going to be using the chat, so I would like to ask you guys to, if you can, save your questions towards the end of the webinar. That way, as you can see your questions coming in, and we'll address those accordingly. Okay. So I want to take a moment to just remind you to keep an eye on our ongoing webinar series. This series has really been a great way for folks to participate amongst the OpenNebula community and really learn about the exciting developments going on in the cloud and edge computing space. We've been keeping a pretty fluid schedule of events, so just like I said, keep a close eye on our updated calendar throughout the year. Okay, and just a moment before I hand things over to Tino, I wanted to take a quick overview of OpenNebula systems. So, and give you an idea of what we're doing as a company. We're first and foremost a company that's dedicated to developing and delivering open source software. We've been leading and managing the open source project of OpenNebula for well over a decade now. And at the same time, we provide enterprise support and professional services to really tend to the needs of customers and users in their production implementations. We're headquartered in Madrid, Spain. We also have offices in the US as well as the Czech Republic. Okay. And here, I just want to review this quick slide to kind of show you some general indicators of how broadly OpenNebula is used by our community of users and enterprise customers. There are over 5,000 active OpenNebula clouds running, some scaling as large as supporting 16 different data centers and up to 300,000 cores. And then down below, you can really take a look and see the breadth of steady users across all industries, showcasing how OpenNebula is really a production and enterprise ready solution. Okay, so at this moment, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to hand things over to Tino, and he'll pick things up from here.
Thank you, Michael. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining us in this afternoon of spring, depending where you are. Maybe it's morning and fall, but sorry. Okay, so I wanted to introduce you first to OpenNebula, and then what functionality, what relevant functionality we introduced in OpenNebula 6.0, and also what of this functionality is specific for VMware, can be used on top of VMware infrastructures. So let's start with, so for the newcomers, what's OpenNebula? OpenNebula, it's an open source project that implements a cloud management platform. So it's a piece of software that you can use to turn machines in your data center into a multi-tenant cloud, in which you can deploy different types of workloads. You can deploy actually virtual machines or containers, or even Kubernetes clusters to run bots or Helm charts. And you can do so in your on-prem hardware, which can be based on ESX or vSphere, or it can be based on open source hypervisors like KVM. And you can also extend your OpenNebula cloud using resources from public cloud providers and edge providers as well. Okay, a bit more on detail on what kind of hypervisors and workloads you can manage with OpenNebula. You can see that you can manage VMware clusters, and you can run virtual machines on top of that. You can also manage a farm of KVM servers, also for virtual machines. But you can also manage LXC servers to run system containers, or even Firecracker hypervisors for micro VMs. Okay, and on top of that, you can use third-party tools that are integrated with OpenNebula, like Terraform, Kubernetes, or you can control your virtual infrastructure using Ansible. Okay, so a bit on what's new in our latest stable release, that's OpenNebula 6.0 Mutara. One of the highlights for people managing VMware infrastructures with OpenNebula is support for vSphere 7.0, which, as you may know, it brings not a lot of changes in behavior, but a lot of nice new features like the lifecycle manager or the identity manager that should make admin's life easier. So you can build now an OpenNebula multi-tenant cloud on top of these vSphere 7 infrastructures. A nice feature also that we introduced, it's the support for the remote console of VMware. So now using Sunstone, which is the web interface of OpenNebula, you can access the console of your virtual machines running in VMware using this VMRC. one of the main motivators is that VMware dropped support for VNC in their latest vSphere 7. So this technology that for OpenNebula, it was very useful to provide homogeneous access to all virtual machines running either in KVM or in VMware, but that's not possible anymore in the latest version. So we introduced also the possibility to run these VMRC proxies delivered by the OpenNebula server. Okay, now getting a bit more on general features on OpenNebula that are not specific for VMware, but can be used in cloud running on top of VMware and managed by OpenNebula. So let's go in detail in these new features. So this is probably the most relevant addition to OpenNebula in the last 3 or 4 years. So this is the ability to basically, using an OpenNebula frontend, you can now manage, you could before, your on-prem infrastructure, say vCenter clusters or KVM hypervisors. And now you have the ability with this new feature, which is the ability to dynamically increase the size of your cloud using resources from public cloud providers and edge providers. The way that we implemented this is by creating remote edge clusters on these providers. So you can run the same workload you're running on-prem, but on these remote edge clusters running in different providers. So the idea is that you can run the same workloads, the same VMs, containers, Kubernetes clusters. You can run them on-prem, and if need be, because you don't have enough capacity on-prem, or because you want to give or to deploy a service as closer as possible to the end user to minimize latency, you can do so by increasing or extending your OpenNebula infrastructure with these public and edge cloud providers. And you can do this, you can do this on demand, okay? So you can create and destroy these edge clusters whenever you need them and only pay for them in those times. Okay, this is a low-level view of the edge clusters. So these are deployed on these remote public cloud providers, and they implement this lightweight architecture where basically you use the local hard disks of the servers running in the cloud, in the remote cloud, and OpenNebula creates all this architecture automatically for you. So you don't have to worry about anything else than providing the credentials to the OpenNebula tool, and OpenNebula will deploy that and roll that into the OpenNebula, into your OpenNebula frontend, and you are ready to go. Start deploying workload on top of these remote edge clusters. Okay, these are snapshots of the new web interface. That's FireEdge One Provision that allows you to create these edge clusters. So you see that we created a catalog of these edge providers. We are going to keep increasing the amount of edge and cloud providers where you can create these edge clusters on. And so this will give you the ability to extend your cloud with the most cost-effective provider out there at the time. Okay, so this is a bit on what technologies, new technologies you can run on your OpenNebula cloud. So as mentioned before, you can run a Kubernetes or even a K3s cluster on this on your local premises, or also on these remote edge providers. You can run this also on top of your VMware infrastructure. However, at the moment, you cannot run Dockers on your VMware infrastructure using OpenNebula, obviously. So we still don't integrate with Tensu, but we are working towards that goal. So we truly want to make OpenNebula abstract whatever it's below it, so you can run any workload at any given time in any infrastructure. That's objective. Okay, some other stuff we worked on is OneFlow. So OneFlow is the component of OpenNebula that lets you create multi-VM application. This can be also a multi-container application or even a mix. You can create a service, a OneFlow service that has a mix of virtual machines and containers and that can run in different clusters. So you can create an application that deploys in different geographic locations and control that as a single entity and apply elasticity rules on top of that. So we've been adding new features and also improving the performance of the OneFlow tool in the latest OpenNebula release. We also introduced the ability, this was long overdue, the ability to create backups of your virtual machines. So until now, for instance, for VMware infrastructures, you could use Veeam, and you can set Veeam tags using OpenNebula. Now you still have that possibility, but you can also make use of this new functionality, which basically allows you to take periodic snapshots or backups of your virtual machines and take them to a particular marketplace. So a marketplace in OpenNebula can be a private marketplace that has a backend based on an HTTP server or even an S3 service like the Amazon S3 or even a Ceph cluster with a S3 interface. So you can make periodic backups of your VMs running in OpenNebula and take them to one of these external private marketplaces and obviously restore it afterwards if you have the need to. Okay, some other maybe not that directly related with VMware, but nonetheless available in OpenNebula 6.0. It's the ability to create LXC containers. So up until now, you could use LXD, but we made the jump to LXC. You can also use BNC, SSH, and RDP using Guacamole, all from within the Sunstone interface, very much like you can do it with the new VMRC integration. You can also deploy the front end as a bunch of containers, which makes the upgrades much easier. And we added more functionality to the OpenNebula marketplaces, so it now supports also VM templates and most importantly services. So you can start from OpenNebula from scratch and download a service from the public marketplace that will deploy, for instance, a Kubernetes cluster on your OpenNebula cloud. Okay, so if you haven't done so and you want to try the new version, you can follow the official documentation. There's a new section, which is the quick start guide. And there will guide you through the process of deploying a front end using a mini-one script if you're using a Linux box, or if you have a VMware infrastructure, you can download V1 Cloud, which is an OVA appliance that will get you the Nebula 6 installation. And you can then start also trying these edge cluster capabilities of OpenNebula, introducing your AWS credentials, or starting, for instance, creating edge clusters in any region you feel like. And well, learn the basics of how to operate your OpenNebula cloud. Okay, and these are some additional resources. So there's linked in the OpenNebula webpage, opennebula.io. You have screencasts and datasheets and white papers that will help you understand more about how OpenNebula operates VMware infrastructure and how it can build a multi-tenant environment based only on vCenter and ESX components. Okay, so it's time for a little break. I'll try and get a poll for you. 1 sec.
Yeah, thanks, Tino. So yeah, we're going to take a quick moment. There we go. To launch a quick poll. Hopefully you can take just a few seconds to answer these questions, and then we'll jump back into the demo with Jim. Okay, hopefully everybody's got had a chance to answer the questions here. All right. Okay, so it looks like the majority of you are taking a look at OpenNebula and comparing it to other products in the market. Certainly a good place to start. All right. So at this point, Jim's going to take things over and walk through a demo.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, everyone. My name is Jim. I'm a cloud solutions architect here, and today just going to go through a quick demo of OpenNebula. Really, it's going to be how we get access and set up the V1 Cloud appliance, as well as importing your VMware resources, configuring templates, building VMs, and bits like that. So the first thing to do to get started is go to v1cloud.today, and there's a try V1 Cloud now button. It will take you to a short form on our website to fill in, just to kind of get some details about your evaluation and bits like that. So just a few fields to fill in. Once it's all filled in, you'll get an email straight away come through. This will have a link to actually download it. Said it's a 700 megs. It's an OVA file that we're going to import into vCenter once that's downloaded. So I said log into your vCenter environment where you actually want to deploy this. This is essentially the front end that you'd log into to manage everything. Select the cluster that you want to deploy the OVF on. Select the OVA that was downloaded. Be uploading at this point. And here you just kind of go through the standard, VMware wizard where you would name a virtual machine, select what cluster you want to put it in, any kind of additional resources like storage, what kind of storage policies you want to use and bits like that. All of the networking details. And then there's just a finish button. Just take a couple of minutes to upload the OVA and provision it as a VM. Won't wait for it to finish, speed this up a bit. And you can see there's now a VM in that cluster. This one's called JF V1 Cloud. At this point, you wanna power it on. And in just a few seconds, once it's on, you open up the web console. OpenNebula has a short configuration screen here that we're going to use to configure some bits and pieces once everything's up and running. First thing we do here is we need to configure the actual networking settings. So this is for essentially the IP details where you would log in to Sunstone. Set a host name as well. Once that's done, we're actually going to set the actual password. So I'm going to set the password for the OneAdmin account, which is what you would use to log in to Sunstone, and also setting a password for the root account of the VM. So if you need to log in and change any of the configuration files or anything like that, you can do that. Take a few seconds. Essentially, once all this is set, you set the public endpoint of FireEdge. This is a new UI Tino was talking about earlier. This will allow us to kind of proxy the VMRC through, and you need to add in here a IP address or FQDN of what you would use to use it. So that's done, you actually go to the IP and you'll see the login screen, and you'll be able to log in with your OneAdmin account that you set previously. Once we're inside here, now we're going to look into importing our VMware resources. So to start with, we'll go to this infrastructure tab, and we're going to create a host inside of OpenNebula here. We'll select vCenter, and now we need to input the details of your vCenter environment. So IP address or FQDN, a username and password that has sufficient privileges to get access to everything. And when we click Get Clusters, it will poll your vCenter environment, get a list of all the clusters, and you'll be able to select the ones you wish to import. Once that's done, you can see OpenNebula has actually created a cluster automatically here inside of OpenNebula as well, and that host has automatically been assigned. You can also click into this host that's been imported. You kind of see all like performance metrics for CPU and memory, any VMs that are currently running, NSX details, information on any resource pools, the underlying ESXi hosts, any wild VMs as well, but we'll come back to a bit later. Once everything's imported there, we're actually going to import an existing data store that's already in vCenter. So we're going to do the same kind of concept. You click Import vCenter data stores, you select your cluster name, and again, it pulls a list of the data stores again. Select the one you want to import, and that gets imported automatically and assigned to that VMware cluster in OpenNebula. You can see it's created a system and an image data store. It's just OpenNebula concepts that we use to handle VMs and templates. And we'll move on to creating networks here. So you can create and import networks. To start with, we'll import one. Same concept, polls all of the networks that are available. You can select the ones you want to import. I'll just choose one here and click import. In just a few seconds, you'll be able to refresh the page and you'll see that the network's been imported. And here you can see all the details as well, any kind of IP addresses that are already assigned, and everything else. So as I said, you can actually create them yourself. So this will create them inside of vCenter. So you can configure what kind of network you want to create, whether it's a kind of a standard switch or a distributed port group, and even NSX. So support NSX V and NSXT. Another really good, use case here is for virtual networks, template. Sorry, this allows your end users to provision, their own networks based on the parameters that you set there. And next, we'll move into actually importing an existing VM template. So again, we poll the list of templates in the cluster, and we select the ones you want to import. just a few seconds, you'll be able to see the template exists in OpenNebula, and we can update it at this point here. So we'll just show some of the options that are available. By clicking in, you can edit all of these details. One example here is we can kind of fix the CPU values so they're not customizable during deployment. Or you can configure the RAM here, so when someone goes to build a VM, they can only select RAM increments from the numbers that you put here. And there's lots of other customization options there, but templates is really kind of a core part of it. And once it's all done, we can instantiate this VM from this template. You put in your host name for the virtual machine, select all your resources that you want, whether you want to configure memory, CPU, disks. And once you click the instantiate button, you'll see the VM deployment starts. You can see it's currently in boot status, but just a few seconds, it will be up and running. And now we want to look at some of the properties and actions on this virtual machine page. As you said earlier about VMIC, this is a VMIC button. It proxies it through FireEdge, so it gives you a really fast, responsive console without needing to download any third-party applications or plugins or anything like that. And also it gives you performance metrics for CPU and RAM, storage, the ability to take snapshots. And obviously, once a snapshot's been taken, you can revert to it or delete it. A lot of things are scheduled actions, so you can schedule the VM to terminate or power off or take a snapshot, and any kind of periodic or fixed times. Finally, here we're looking to importing an existing VM. So we have an existing VM. We can just import that in the wild section. And you can see it's already been imported here and it's up and running. Cool. So yeah, that's the demo. And obviously, I know it's just a quick overview, but if it's something you want to see more of and in more detail, we're happy to talk further and answer any questions. Cool. Thanks. Over to you, Michael.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to take a few minutes to review our OpenNebula Enterprise subscriptions. So while OpenNebula is an open source software, many organizations they do look for security and the stability that we offer our customers through our subscription offerings. And some of those key benefits that we provide really come down to getting access to the enterprise edition of the software. So the enterprise edition is a more hardened and tested version of OpenNebula, and it grants customers with access to minor enhancements, software patches, bug fixes. It also provides access to LTS releases, LTS versions. So these are long-term supported versions, which really provide you broader flexibility and kind of managing your upgrade strategy. Obviously, one of the other key benefits is being able to receive SLA-based enterprise support with direct access to our support and engineering teams. You have access to your own private portal to really address issues and inquiries that you may have. Then you also get access to our curated knowledge base, with best practices, how-to guides, some reviews of use cases, and then subscribing customers have access to the several professional services that we offer as well, including cloud deployment services, upgrade service, we have training, consulting, and engineering, as well as a managed cloud service. Okay. Hopefully today you've been able to at least begin to see, just how powerful and simple it is to run OpenNebula on top of, your VMware infrastructure. And one of the things is when you take it and compare it to, commercially licensed VMware products, including, vRealize, vCloud Director, in most cases, you're going to see that you have an enterprise cloud solution that can really go head to head with the VMware suite of tools, and really for a much lower price tag. So with an OpenNebula subscription, not only would you have enterprise support for, what is really an easy and customizable solution, that's going to adapt to your needs, and one that provides multi-site, right, and true hybrid cloud capabilities, but you're also getting a solution that's, largely reduced. It provides a largely reduced total cost of ownership. One that's going to provide you the flexibility to integrate with multiple technologies as well, right? Your KVM hypervisors, LXC system containers, and Firecracker micro VMs, and also one that's really going to provide, huge savings in your corporate checkbook. So if you haven't reviewed it already, we've published a competitive pricing review document. It's referenced here in the slide, and it's just an analysis of lining these two products up commercially, and hopefully you can take a look at it out on our website. Okay, so that's pretty much it from the presentation perspective. Like I said, we can now jump into the question and answer segment of the webinar. We will start taking a look at questions that you send through the chat. Okay. Okay, I think one of the questions that came through was, what is a virtual router in terms of OpenNebula? Maybe Tino or Jim, you can clarify that.
So virtual router, it's in terms of OpenNebula, it's just a logical resource, which is basically a virtual machine with some specific characteristics. So it's one of the templates that we offer for virtual router is an Alpine Linux that it's configured to bridge two isolated networks. So it's a PM with two network interfaces, and that is capable of doing routing between the two networks. And OpenNebula offers different mechanisms to manage these special VMs. You have the ability to create a floating IP for a cluster of virtual routers, so you have high availability. And we keep adding new network functionality to these virtual routers.
Okay. There's a question here about the need to use NSXT.
No, it's not a requirement.
It's not required, right?
You can use it, but it's not a requirement.
Okay. We also have a question here about the backup feature, right? And whether it's going to be improved in the future. The question is whether we have more options and support for backing up running VMs.
Yeah, I mean, this is our initial take for backups. We haven't defined a complete roadmap for it, but definitely we'll keep an eye on the feedback of the community, and we'll improve it with that feedback.
Okay. There's a question here about, well, this one's more one that I can take in terms of asking about options for training if you don't have a subscription. We do offer a course, our intro course. We offer it on a quarterly basis and in a public domain. So you can essentially, we have a link out on Eventbrite, and you can sign up to take this one day intro course. The next one we have scheduled is for, I believe it's June 17th. I'll make sure to send out the link here in the chat. But in terms of the additional training services that we provide, private training for essentially the three levels of coursework, we really do limit those to subscribing customers. Okay. A few questions here. Another question about, can you move VMs between clouds?
Yeah, so no, at the moment you cannot. I mean, even though you may be running the same hypervisor, the same version, maybe a compatible hardware, you still need a network. And unless you want to migrate over the internet, no, you cannot really move VMs from one cloud to another.
Okay. I see a question here from Mark. For the NSX integration, is it just to deploy and manage NSX networks, or can you also deploy and manage edge firewall devices?
So at the moment, you cannot create firewall devices. So the support that we have, it's the ability to create NSX networks and also an integration with the security groups of OpenNebula, which will create firewall rules in NSX.
Okay. As we're seeing, does the new version support NSXT 3.x?
So yeah, the functionality that we consume from NSXT and NSXP, it's compatible with all NSX versions that are higher than one something. It's in the documentation, I don't remember now. So yeah, we covered that.
Okay. All right. See a question here about integration and integration documentation with ServiceNow. Right. Yeah, I don't think that's the case. Tino, maybe you can clarify.
No, at the moment we don't have any integration or documentation on how to integrate OpenNebula with ServiceNow.
I think kind of an add-on to that is that although there's not anything native, like we have an API and also a lot of like client libraries available that that you can use to build these integrations, whether it's into any kind of CRM or chargeback system or whatever. So you can take all the information out through the API, but there's not a native kind of support.
Okay, let's see what else. A question here about if there are tools available to migrate a KVM environment to VMware. Right? Is it also possible to export a KVM1 template to vCenter?
Okay, so at the moment, we provide tools to migrate at the image level. So you can take one image from a KVM environment, like a cookout2 or raw image. And if you have both systems in the same OpenNebula instance, you can automatically clone one image from one cookout2 data store, for instance, and take it to a vCenter data store, and OpenNebula will automatically convert that into a VMDK for you. But it's not possible at the moment to extract VM template from KVM and automatically create that in vCenter. So you still need a VM template in vCenter, and you can, from OpenNebula, just change the disk for the one that you imported from KVM. So it's not an automatic process, but we have tools to help in this migration.
Yeah, it's quite a good question on the V1 Cloud right now is using CentOS 8. And I know obviously there's a lot of controversy going on with that. I think that the jury's still out to see what the the natural replacement for it is, but obviously CentOS 8 everyone uses now does go into life by the end of this year, so it's something we will have to address.
Okay, there's a question here. Oh, or more of a comment. Well, comment and question, right? Is V1 Cloud good for production network in an enterprise, or is it just for testing purposes? What would you recommend for an environment with up to 1,000 VMs in the school network? Mainly for IT labs.
Yeah, I mean, like, so it's part of our kind of like quick start guide where we have Mini1 for KVM and Firecracker, etc., and V1 Cloud as a a really simple appliance to get started. I think there's a lot more variables to take into account when you're planning a a real world large production environment. The default OVA that you build here has got set resources and things like that, and probably not going to scale at that size to to a huge production environment. So we have full documentation and guides, and we have a a deployment service as well, where we design and build a cloud for you. So I'd probably use it for testing and evaluating the product, but when you start looking into planning a real environment, that's something to talk with us and check our documentation. I said we have docs for specific planning of larger environments and things like that. So it's a question about billing solutions. So again, we have an API and that anyone can kind of consume for to take data out. We have might not have seen it in the demo, as I didn't cover it in a lot of detail, but on VM templates you can configure pricing on there, and OpenNebula does all these calculations to output a number that you can export via CSV or in JSON, XML, etc. In regards to kind of native billing integrations, it's something we're looking into right now, but hopefully in the coming weeks and months we'll have some integrations available to enterprise customers.
Right. Another question here, whether you can assign different VM actions depending on the user role. Can OpenNebula work without vCenter?
Okay, so can you assign different VM actions depending on user role? Okay, so yeah, so you can restrict what operations user or a particular groups of users can do. This can be enforced at the OpenNebula core level, and also they can be hidden from the web interface. So you have the two choices, you can mix them. Can OpenNebula work without vCenter? So to manage VMware infrastructures, you need vCenter. All the communication between OpenNebula and the infrastructure, it's through vCenter. And of course, you can use OpenNebula without any VMware infrastructure. You can use it just with KVM. Okay.
Okay, we had a question early on from Rui asking about how OpenNebula can create containers or Kubernetes clusters on a VMware cluster.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, there's no support to deploy containers at the moment on VMware infrastructures from OpenNebula. And regarding Kubernetes clusters, they are offered as a service running within a VM. So OpenNebula launches a VM, and inside that VM is a Kubernetes instance that you can interact with and launch pods within that.
Okay. We had another question about someone noticing the screenshot of the VMRC in the presentation, asking which version that was. I think in the 6.0.0.1 says the language selection is not available yet.
Wow, that's quite a good catch. Yeah. So yeah, the screenshot is from a development version, which is going to come up as version 6.0.2 and 6.0.0.2. So one for the community edition, another for the enterprise edition, and it has some improvements in the VMRC and VMC dialogues, including the keyboard layout selection. Yeah.
Nice. There's a little golden nugget for you.
A question: does it support multi-factor authentication? There's a few different options there. So when you create users, and you can actually select an authentication driver. So if you want to use like LDAP or something like that, you can. There's a few other different options available as well. And another kind of addition to that is each user can kind of enable two-factor through like Google Authenticator or Authy and stuff like that by scanning like a QR code on a per user basis. So it's a few different options for user authentication and bits like that.
Okay, we had another question here about billing solutions that are supported and integrated with OpenNebula. We've got some work in the development phase here. Maybe Tino, you want to expand on that? Yeah,
no. So the idea is that you can deploy a Kubernetes cluster using a service and a one-flow service, and this one-flow service is composed of different virtual machines. So in the case of Kubernetes, you have the role of the master instance, controller, Kubernetes controllers, and you have worker nodes in different VMs. So yeah, I mean, you can deploy it just within one VM, but to have a proper Kubernetes cluster, you probably need more than one.
Okay. We also had a question about billing. Right? I think Pierre was asking about which billing solutions are supported and integrated with OpenNebula. I know that we're working on.
I mentioned this a few minutes ago. I said, we have some plans on,
right,
on doing it and releasing kind of like modules for some of the popular billing platforms, that we can offer to enterprise customers.
Exactly.
But we do, as I said, we have an API as well that any of these data can be pulled out and into, there's obviously a wide range of billing platforms from Excel all the way to enterprise solutions. So it's a lot of different flexibility there.
Okay. Robert's asked whether you can manage multiple vCenters simultaneously.
Yeah, you can manage from the same OpenNebula instance different vCenter clusters within the same vCenter instance, and you can also manage different vCenter instances.
All right. I just got another question about our newly introduced Elemental subscription and asking whether or not you have access to the training services that we offer. The answer is no. So our Elemental subscription really focuses on providing organizations access to the Enterprise Edition, along with the enterprise tools. However, professional services, as well as enterprise support, are limited to the standard and premium subscription holders. All right.
Can we use a storage cluster? If we're talking like VMware only, then all OpenNebula does is take the data stores and storage options from vCenter. So whether you're using vSAN or some kind of external SAN or software-defined storage, as long as it's presented to vCenter, you can import it as a data store inside of OpenNebula and use it that way.
Okay.
So yeah, it's also a question about vSAN, so hopefully that answers that. And also a question about integration with NetApp. As I said, if we're talking, vCenter specifically, it's still the vCenter layer that manages all the, whether it's storage or whatever. For OpenNebula in general, we have a lot more kind of options. We have, some partners of ours with like software-defined storage, like StorePool and Limbit. But you can also, we have our own kind of OneStore storage platform as well that uses the disks in the hypervisors, as well as being able to connect to, an iSCSI LUN presented and things like that. So.
Okay, we had another question here about how does OpenNebula interact with SDRS when moving VMs?
Okay, so OpenNebula treats a vCenter cluster as a whole, so it deploys a VM on a specific vCenter cluster, but it doesn't choose a specific ESX, so that's left to DRS. When you move it across different clusters, OpenNebula asks for a recommendation for ESX and also for the storage. But the answer is that if you specify from OpenNebula which data store you want or which priorities to choose a data store, OpenNebula will enforce that decision. If not, it will leave it to the specific policies that you have defined in both DRS and SDRS.
Okay, we have another question. Does OpenNebula support physical host integration to access physical computers within the Sunstone interface?
So the answer to that is that no, we don't support bare metal directly from OpenNebula. We only support servers as hypervisors and running virtualized workloads on top of that.
Okay.
Do you plan to support bare metal provisioning? Yes, in fact, I believe in 601 or maybe in 602, the upcoming 602, through the one provisioning tool. So the same tool that you can use to launch remote edge clusters in public cloud providers, which it basically uses the bare metal offering of these providers. So you are able to do the same with your in-house resources. So you can provide to these FireEdge one provision tool list of host names and credentials. So OpenNebula will create these clusters for you automatically. So bare metal provisioning using that.
Okay, there's a question here about whether OpenNebula supports other providers for bare metal route beyond Equinix Metal. You know, and you may have heard, you know, we're talking about expanding, you know, the resources that we're making available with OpenNebula and our one provision tool. You know, soon we're going to be releasing updated version with integration with Google Cloud, DigitalOcean, right? As well as Vultr, which provides bare metal resources as well. So, and the idea over time is to really build out those capabilities, build out that catalog, so that you'll have as a user and customer, you know, a full catalog of resources from which you can use. So in terms of the timelines of those integrations, you know, our upcoming 6.0.2 release should be incorporating those mentioned providers. And then, like I said, going forward, we're going to be working on other providers like Microsoft Azure and additional providers along the way.
So also an extension of this bare metal provisioning question. So the question is if we are using PXE or Tinkerbell for this bare metal provision. I have to say I'm not sure. I mean, this is quite a recent feature. I assume that we use the same. We probably assume that the an operating system is installed, so it's probably not the bare metal provisioning. You don't go all the way, but this is a really good point. I'll take it back to the development team.
All right. Well, again, it looks like we got through, I think, most of the questions that came through. Just a few minutes over on time, but I wanted to thank you. Actually, let's see, there's one more. We'll take this one last question, and then we'll wrap things up. This is here, are there any plans to try and create an abstraction layer to allow VMs resources to be migrated between providers and hosts? For instance, a VMware VM that fails over to a cloud and back.
So I'd say that's the end goal, right? But there's a lot of challenges to solve before that it's available. So we are working towards that, definitely.
All right. Well, guys, well, thank you for taking the time to join us here. We hope this was a valuable either introduction or review of OpenNebula and its integration with VMware. In the coming days, whether either tomorrow or the next, we will have this recording available and published on our website. Make sure to take a look around our website as well. If you need a specific demo, we have a link to sign up as well. So we look forward and hope to hear more from you. All right. Thanks to everyone. Take care.